Chapter 8, The Assembly. Intro. Tonight the fog came early and did not wait for permission. It pressed its face to the courtyard glass like a homesick thing, breathing a chill onto the panes until our reflections wore frost masks. Hollowshade always pretends it cannot be bothered with drama, yet the stone groaned as if an old throat was clearing. I took that as an omen, though Tuesday says omens are for people who have not learned to listen. The bell called us to the great hall, and the sound carried low, as if dragged through wool. I watched the ravens on the guttering roofline tilt their heads and refuse to fly. Smart birds, Juniper tugged my sleeve as students in neat lines streamed past, collars straight, voices politely threaded into whispers. The whispers were not about classes or grades, not tonight. They ran on a single narrow track, the way water finds its old riverbed. Withdrawn, someone breathed. That old word again. Withdrawn like teeth from a jaw. Withdrawn like names from a ledger. The fog clung to ankles when the doors opened, and it went with us like a pale dog that had decided to adopt the school. If the hall is a mouth, the ceiling is its vaulting palate and the chandeliers its teeth. Light gathered there as if afraid to come down. The faculty sat like chess pieces arranged for a game that started years ago and never ended. Headmistress Vale took the centre in her high chair. She has the sort of face that looks carved in poor light and improved by it. Her eyes are softer when you cannot see them. Scraps clung to my coat as I slid into our row. She had attached herself to me the second week, when Tuesday told me to stop pretending I had a choice in the matter. A small hand, stitches puckered, button eyes that reflected more than they saw. You would not think a companion like her could have weight, yet my sleeve dragged when she shifted. Tuesday calls her a needle heart in a rag body. Scraps turned her little face toward the dais and stilled. Even buttons can flinch if the room persuades them. Juniper tried to look cheerful because cheerfulness is her version of a shield. It chipped at the edges tonight. Her mouth wanted to smile, but the smile thought better of it and became something like patience. I could feel her thinking next to me, the way small animals think inside walls, constantly testing the distance to their exits. Headmistress Vale rose, and the hall cooled, though I suspect the cold came from within the walls, and only chose that moment to declare itself. The chandeliers licked out a little more flame for her. She did not ask them to. I imagine Hollowshade knows how to flatter authority with lighting. "Students," she said, and it was the tone reserved for mischief one intends to tolerate as long as it is tidy. "We gather for a reminder. Safety is not a suggestion. Tradition is not a costume. There have been stories, rumours. I have no patience for either." She paused to let the silence settle, and the silence did as it was told, which is to say it grew heavy and obeyed. At my side, Tuesday rested her chin on one knuckle and examined the headmistress as if she were a specimen pinned to black velvet. You could almost hear Tuesday thinking. People mistake her quiet for absence, the way they mistake fog for empty air. They are wrong on both counts. "We belong to a lineage of excellence," Headmistress Vale continued. "Hollowshade has survived fires and floods, the loss of records and the wanderings of fashions. We have endured it all by knowing the difference between noise and signal. You are the present stewards of that distinction." Professor Marrow sat 2 chairs to her left and folded his long hands over a folder of papers. His hands are the sort that do not forget chalk, even in summer. He did not look at Tuesday, which is how I knew he knew exactly where she was. And then it happened. Not a sound at first, but a pressure, a minute shift in the hall's breath, a tremor across the surface of the gathered students like wind darkening the skin of a lake. A girl cleared her throat in the front row. A boy near the side door rubbed his temples. A whisper threaded the air with the ease of something that had been here longer than us and would stay longer than our bones. Monday's child is fair of face. It came in Latin first, which is to say, it came like prayer, and then it slipped into English with the slow contentment of water finding sinkholes. I have heard many things at Hollowshade since I arrived. I have listened for the scrape of hidden doors and the hush of faculty secrets leaking beneath office thresholds. This was not the sound of people choosing to speak. This was the sound of mouths remembering a story they were told to forget and saying it anyway. Tuesday did not move. She looked mildly entertained, the way a cat might look at a puzzle it expects to solve before breakfast. Juniper's fingers found mine and squeezed. I looked around and took inventory. This is what I do when I am afraid. Count the safe things. The curve of the balcony rail beneath the senior seats. The pattern in the stone where the mason left his thumbprint. Scrap's threadwork pulled a little at the shoulder seam. 3 stitches strained. 3 is not a lucky number here. Headmistress Vale placed one hand on the lectern. Her ring caught the light with an obedient flash. "Enough," she said, in a tone one might use to a child who has discovered a noisy toy. The hush did not obey. If anything, it grew curious. The rhyme ran on a second breath. Tuesday's child is full of grace. The word grace slid against my neck like a damp ribbon. Somewhere behind us, a student tried to laugh and found that laughter was not permitted in that shape. It came out thin and apologetic and died fast. Professor Laurel of Nocturnal Studies, pale and beautifully tired, glanced at the headmistress and shook her head a fraction, the kind of motion that belongs to people who have seen too many versions of the same trouble and can recognize the thread no matter how it is woven. I noticed the vampire delegation along the wall blinked more slowly, as though their eyes did not appreciate the cadence of a nursery. The chandeliers tinged as if tiny forks had been set down at a tiny banquet. Cold gathered at our ankles. This is the part where Hollowshade likes to pretend it is only a building. I do not believe it remembers names, but it remembers patterns. The air above us held the pattern of caution. Scraps pressed closer against my arm and clicked her buttons together. It sounded like teeth. Tuesday whispered, without moving her mouth, "Listen for what they do not deny." The headmistress smiled and did nothing with it. "Tradition is a sea with depth," she said. "We skim the surface at our peril." She might as well have said, "Do not drown in old songs." I saw Professor Marrow's jaw tighten. He despises imprecision, which makes him an excellent teacher and a poor liar. The rhyme came again quieter, as if deciding whether attention would feed it. Wednesday's child is full of woe. A boy coughed. A girl shivered like a candle discovering a draught. The faculty sat very still in their seats and watched us, not with alarm, which would have been human, but with assessment, which is a different species of concern. They were not surprised. They were measuring. Juniper leaned in a whisper too gentle for malice. "If another student disappears," she said, "we will not call it a transfer." Her eyes were bright, and brightness is sometimes a kind of bravery. She has more courage than she believes. I think she borrowed some from fear and forgot to return it. I felt the tug first, a polite pinch at my wrist where I had tied the black thread yesterday as a dare to the dark. It tightened of its own mind. Scrap's small hand lifted and pointed at the high windows, and I followed the line of her finger to the drape cords. One cord swayed with no help from air. It traced a narrow vertical like a throat swallowing. Headmistress Vale adjusted a page that did not need adjusting. "We will respect curfews," she said. "We will attend classes. There will be no wandering into sealed wings, no expeditions into storage, no pranks in towers. Safety is a discipline, not a wish." She was not wrong. Wishes do almost nothing here. Wishes are birds that hit the old glass and leave a ghost print. Tuesday raised her hand, slow enough to be artless. The headmistress could not pretend not to see. Vale nodded. Permission is a performance, even for people who do not believe in theatre. "Headmistress," Tuesday said, and her voice carried as if the hall wanted to hear how she would end the sentence. "If safety is a discipline, is silence the exam?" I admired her for that. How often people ask why silently and call it caution. Tuesday asks why out loud and calls it sport. The faculty did a collective blink that looked like agreement to reconsider the day. Professor Marrow's throat moved like a snake thinking about rats. Professor Laurel closed her eyes as though she had bitten a lemon that was mostly memory. "Miss Graye," said the headmistress, and she put warmth under the words like a placemat, "there are matters that belong to faculty. You are children, not auditors." "The rhyme," Tuesday said, almost gently. "Will it be graded on a curve?" A laugh tried to be born and died. Juniper's hand shook against mine and then steadied. I do not think she knew which she feared more, the question or the answer. I am not sure I did either. Headmistress Vale did not lose her smile, but she did set it down. "Hollowshade," she said, "has endured because we do not invite panic to our table. Rumours of disappearances are cruel to families and cruel to you. We will not indulge them. We will not name shadows and then pretend they must be guests. You are safe." Safe is one of those words that grows teeth when you say it too often. The rhyme ran again, shorter, tattered by our attention. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. The rest failed to take. Scraps tugged my sleeve. She has no voice, yet she speaks with intent. I felt her attention tilt toward the balcony, where a senior with a silver prefect badge watched the hall with heavy-lidded patience. He did not blink during the rhyme. He did not move when the chords swayed. He wrote something on a small card and tucked it into his cuff. Tuesday followed my look and scrawled a note in the margin of her program, the kind of note that looks like a doodle and is not. She drew a small bird with a paper body. The headmistress concluded with a pledge we were asked to repeat. "Obedience tastes of chalk when you put it on your tongue." Students murmured the words, and the words fell into the hall without even a proper splash. We were dismissed. When the benches scraped back in chorus, I tasted iron in the air, as if someone had set a knife on the windowsill and forgotten it. The fog had thickened to the colour of old pewter. Tuesday rose without hurry, and the tide of students parted along her edges. This is something she does without appearing to. I trailed, which is my habit, standing in her windlass, and Juniper flanked us as if she were light trying to make a halo around a shadow. In the corridor, light failed to commit to the sconces, and the sconces pretended not to mind. We moved with the flow, shoulders brushed with wool and hair oils, and the powder-dry smell of books that should have been retired decades ago. I could feel the building listening, not in a magical sense, only in the way old places collect the residue of voices, the way curtains collect smoke. The corridor corners hoarded drafts. Someone had carved a rhyme fragment into the baseboard and sanded it down until only the ghost of words remained. Thursday's child has far to go. If I squinted, I could see the initials that followed, a girl's careful letters that had not been completely erased. There are always leftovers. You cannot erase a life without crumbs. Juniper caught the carving too and touched her finger to the faint groove, then wiped her finger on her skirt, as if the words could stain. "Do you think," she began, then stopped because she did not want to grant the thought a shape by making it walk around as speech. "Think in complete sentences," Tuesday said. "It is the only fair thing to do to fear." Juniper breathed. "Do you think the rhyme chooses us, or we choose it?" "It is a mirror held at an angle," Tuesday said. "The room exists either way." Professor Marrow passed us then with the briskness of someone who has an appointment with his reputation. He did not look at us, and so he looked at us completely. His eyes skimmed the corridor like hands that do not wish to touch but must take inventory. He had chalk on his cuff. Chalk gets everywhere. It is the nature of instruction to mark. We stepped into the quad and let the sky teach us the temperature. The fog had lowered to the height of breath. The gargoyles that flanked the library's north face had wet mouths, rain collected at their lips. You could call that water, or you could call it drool. Both would be correct. A string of paper birds had been strung between two bare lindens by a student who liked crafts and did not understand that crafts can be weapons in certain company. The birds stirred slightly with no help from any honest wind. Tuesday approached them with the caution she would offer a sleeping dog. "They will say children attach them," Juniper said. "They will say it is harmless." "Harmless is a word that ages badly," Tuesday said. I watched her pinch the string and halt the motion. The birds held still, like a breath held beneath the ribs while a door creaks. That moment of choice before you either run or announce yourself. Scraps stood in my pocket and tipped. Her button eyes reflected the paper. She lifted one hand, then the other, an imitation of a child who has learned clapping and not the reason for it. "Do not touch," said Professor Laurel, and her voice came from behind us in a gentle knife. "Please, paper cuts are a nuisance, and so are messages you cannot unread." Her mouth tried to be kind. It is not easy to be kind here without becoming dishonest. Kindness hates conditions. Hollowshade loves them. Tuesday did not let go. "Have you read this one already?" she asked. Professor Laurel's pale gaze slipped to the nearest bird and away again. "I make a point of not indulging theatrics," she said. "It is astonishing how many things die when you stop clapping." "That is a different story," Tuesday said. Laurel watched Tuesday with a look I have seen on people who discover a splinter they cannot remove in the middle of a piano piece. She nodded at Scraps. "Keep her close," she said to me, and if there was pity in it, she hid it well. We returned to the dorm with the paper birds still stirring behind us. In the corridor, our steps sounded wrong, a half-beat late, the echoes lagging like a student who has not decided to obey. Juniper brushed her knuckles against the wall as if to check that stone remembered how to be solid. My wrist thread had loosened, yet when I glanced down I saw a second thread crisscrossing the first, finer and less clean. It looked like hair. I resisted the urge to pull. Inside our room, the window showed a courtyard slick with low light. The gargoyle opposite ours had collected a drop in its mouth and refused to spit. Tuesday sat on the radiator and opened her notebook. She writes with a pencil so sharp the words could draw blood if they fell. Juniper made tea no one would drink and set the cup between us like a peace offering to a small war. Scraps climbed onto the desk and laid her cheek on the wood. I have never seen fabric look exhausted. There is a first time for most things. I pulled the curtain half across the window, and in the little triangle of glass left to me, I caught a reflection I did not recognize. It moved with me, yet there was that moment of lag, a half-beat, as if the mirror were a bad conversationalist and needed you to repeat the last line before it answered. When I lifted my hand, the reflection lifted too, but late. My name did not come when I called myself inside my skull. This happens sometimes, I answer to most things if spoken with feeling. Tuesday says that is a problem and a skill. Name the pattern, Tuesday said, as if she had heard the thought. The assembly was not to inform, I said. It was to measure. They wanted to see who would listen and how. The rhyme rides the air when we gather. The faculty do not startle, they count reactions. The headmistress changed words, not policy. Tuesday's mouth did not smile, which is one of the ways she tells you she approves. Continue. The birds, I said. If they are a message, they are also bait. Whoever sets them wants the watcher to step closer. The prefect with the silver badge did not blink during the rhyme. He wrote a note for his cuff while everyone else had goose flesh. He already knows the script. Professor Laurel fears paper more than knives tonight. Juniper blew on tea she would not drink. I think the school likes the sound of our fear, she said. and then blinked at herself as if surprised the thought had been brave enough to exit her head. "Sorry, that sounded silly." "Not silly," Tuesday said. "Useful." She tapped her pencil twice against the notebook. "Fear is a radio. You can tune it." I touched the threads on my wrist. The second strand did not feel like hair now. It felt like a line thrown from a boat in fog. The moment I tried to follow where it led, the direction changed, as if the thrower had noticed my attention and tugged back. "Do you think the headmistress is the villain?" Juniper asked, because she cannot stop offering the world a chance to clarify itself. "I think the headmistress is the weather," Tuesday said. "You can complain to the wind if it makes you feel better." In the hall, a door closed with the softness of a hand over a mouth. Scraps sat up and turned her head toward the sound. Her buttons reflected the corridor, 2 tiny ovals of dark with a silver seam down the middle where the light broke. The seam widened. For a long blink the corridor was there and not there, the way a road looks when heat lifts it. I stood and opened the door. The corridor had returned to its correct shape, which is to say imperfect and smug about it. On the baseboard by our threshold a strip of paint had peeled to show an older layer beneath, a paler grey that remembered being chosen by a different headmistress for reasons that did not include us. Someone had written a single word across that old bone colour and then painted over it. Grace. Paint ages. Paint forgets to keep secrets. I touched the letters that were not there. The air around my finger went cold as a coin in winter. Tuesday was suddenly at my shoulder without having crossed the room. "Do you want to tell me now," she said softly, "that you heard it before the hall did?" "I do not want to," I said, because honesty frightens me when the room is listening. "But yes." She watched me with an interest she rarely spends on people. "Where?" "Below the floor of the dais," I said, like a voice that would rather crawl than stand. It was there before the headmistress spoke. It doesn't care for her timing. Tuesday nodded as if accepting a weather report. "Then we are closer than I hoped and not as close as I fear." She looked at Scraps, who looked at nothing. "Keep her with you," she said to me. "If you cannot keep her safe, keep her witnessed." In the courtyard, a wind woke up and then remembered it had promised to stay quiet. The ravens shook themselves and finally chose sky. It was late for them to rise. Perhaps they were embarrassed by their caution. They beat their wings against the last of the light and went to their black appointments. We slept, which is to say we lay down and pretended. A thread around my wrist tugged once, very politely, as if asking whether I was ready to go. I said no without words, and the line went slack like a disappointed fisherman. In my sleep, I walked the hall from the assembly to the quad, counting sconces, counting benches, counting faces. When I reached the baseboard with the sanded letters, I found the initials again, and this time they did not pretend to be gone. LB carved lightly like a child, pressing a secret between her teeth. I woke with the letters in my mouth. You can taste fear, but this tasted like chalk and an old year that did not finish itself. Outro. If you made it this far, you already know the hall is not quiet when it pretends to be, and that the rhyme likes an audience. If you want to see what the ravens refuse to watch, find me where the shadows do their best work. The diary goes on in places that prefer low light. Find me in the dark corners if you dare. YouTube, https www.youtube.com@tueyschild-diaries. Instagram, https www.instagram.com tuesdaygraye. Pinterest, https www.pinterest.com Tuesdays Child Diaries. TikTok, https www.tiktok.com @Tuesdays Child Diaries. I will leave the lamp low. If you knock, knock softly. The walls are learning our names.